Arts Alive. I'm Lynda Philippi. My guest is Nicole Dell, and Nicole is new to the Art Harvest Studio Tour this year. She's going to talk about her work and the process of her work. Thanks for coming today.
Thank you for asking me. It was a treat to be invited.
Let's just dive right in to your images, and you can start sort of talking us through what it is you do, because you said it's kind of hard to qualify.
It is. In the most basic sense, I use photography.
Okay.
But I'm not trained in that medium. I'm still learning how to use my camera. There are lots of buttons and settings on it that I don't know. I don't even know how they work, much less how to utilize them. So I start with really basic things, and then I transfer that to another tool, which is take those digital images onto the computer and manipulate them using Photoshop. And again, I don't have any formal training in using Photoshop. So a lot of what I do is experimental. I try this, I try that, and I'll end up with, sometimes as many as 30 variations of a single image, and then the hard part is trying to evaluate them and choose which one
do you like?
Is the result, right?
You kind of work like I do, just push the buttons until the right result happens, right?
Exactly.
Here we go.
And I should back up one more step, because the process started with overlays. And what I first started doing was taking pictures of the human body with just stripes of light coming through Venetian blinds, moving across it. Or in this case, this is actually more simple overlay. It was maybe step 2. And I moved on from there to trying to build my own little slide projector at home. That didn't work well. I borrowed the slide projector from the library, and that worked well, but they wanted it back. So eventually I bought a projector monitor.
Okay.
And so the final stage is I'm projecting images onto a human form, photographing them, and then digitally manipulating that photograph.
Cool.
Yeah. So this is part of a series of images that I did when I had 2 family members that were diagnosed with breast cancer. And so I have a whole series of breast images. And I'd always associated those with the moon, and the moon with femininity and being female.
Sure.
So this is just a simple overlay of the image of a breast over the full moon, and it's been colored in Photoshop. And of course, the moon has that wonderful large crater on its lower edge, and I was able to sort of line that up. This is more easily recognizable when it's shown with some of the others. I think if somebody saw just this to start with, they might not recognize anything there besides the moon.
Yeah, I see the moon, but that's about it so far. So, okay, I get it now. There we go.
Yeah, if we had that one together.
Right. Okay. Well, that's really interesting the way you've done that.
So when I'm choosing images to use on overlays, there are all kinds of resources out there, and I have purchased the right to use an image from other photography artists. I've used things that are really old. This is from a vintage anatomical illustration from about the early 1500s.
Wow.
And again, I'm just projecting that image onto a model, taking a photograph, and then heavily cropping, stretching, coloring, inverting. Photoshop is just a basket of things to play with.
How fun.
I'm never quite sure what the result will be, but the great thing is, if I don't like it, all I have to do is back up and try something else.
Yeah, right, exactly. Don't save changes. Oh, I see, okay.
This is one of the early ones. The very first series that I took, and this was starting about 5 years ago, and again, that's just sunlight through Venetian blinds. And what I wanted with these was for you to first notice the color. Ooh, bright, pretty colors, neon colors. And then, oh, pretty shapes. And then finally for it maybe to dawn on you that well, yes, I think it is.
Okay, I like it.
So they're not meant to be easily recognizable. This is an example of one of the overlays that I used, and it's one of my favorites. This is just a photograph of the ceiling of an ice cave.
Okay.
And that was a lot of fun to use. This is from about 1904, a botanical illustration or a biological illustration by Ernest Haeckel, and he made just exquisitely detailed drawings. And this octopus in particular is one that I've just loved to use. That's another vintage anatomy. Yeah, that was just so clever. Wow. So here you see some variations. So the top image, the one on the left, is more untampered with, although it has been cropped and retouched, and I spend a lot of time in Photoshop dinking around with little details, and then heavily color adjusted for the one on the right. Same with the one on the bottom, except instead of being color adjusted, I think I've actually taken all the color out of it and then let a little bit of blue and gray bleed back in.
That's really
And again, those are just really simple images. Here you see an absolutely, on the left, completely raw image. That's what the photograph first looks like. You can see my lovely model there. We're working actually in the basement of my mom's building up against an interesting old rock wall. We have a curtain draped over it. I'm projecting the image of that octopus that we looked at earlier, and you can actually see some of the information that's the projector shows everything you would see right on your computer screen.
Okay, wow.
Then the one on the right is sort of a first step, and that's when I begin to crop, take out the things I don't want you to see. I certainly don't want, the computer data as part of the artwork.
Yeah.
This is another example of a completely raw image. This is before any cropping or treatment. I'm just using a really simple fractal diagram that had sort of the look of stained glass.
Okay.
We're working in the ballroom of the Tempo building downtown. And the nice thing about that big, huge space is it allows me to project the image onto the model and then have the background so far away that it's much easier to take it out. Although in this particular case, I chose not to. I liked the shadow as much as I liked
the ballroom
the
came
image.
out beautiful too.
The ballroom is exquisite.
Oh my gosh, it's so pretty.
Yeah. It was very, very cold that night. I actually had to go run a bath, and the model had to keep, because there's no heat back there, or wasn't at the time.
Okay.
Here you can see just some more variations of the two images that we looked at earlier. And again, I mentioned how difficult it can be to try to determine which one it is that is really the choice. Maybe we should take more of Andy Warhol's approach and group them together like this.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking that actually, just do sort of a little collage of.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun to play around with how you can get different things to stand out. You can see when the image is inverted, it just has a completely different feel to it. It can become kind of ghostly, or it can draw the eye in much different ways. With the one with the octopus on the lower level, you'll notice that the way I've cropped it, the little curl in the tentacle up in the upper left-hand corner of that image looks just like an eye. That's not what it is, and when you looked at just the octopus, that would never occur to you. But when I cropped it that way, it suddenly jumped out as if some malevolent sea creature were sort of lurking
I think that's great.
around the model.
So when people come to see you on the tour, you're going to be at the Tempo building with Marilyn Warwick's your mother, who does the bookmaking, and then also with Doug Roy.
Doug Roy.
Will you have printed these out?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and they'll be printed and framed. So
Okay.
they'll be available for sale in different sizes.
Oh, okay. So will you also then show your process?
I did. I thought I'd just set up the projector monitor
I think that's
with
great.
the images in sequence
Yeah.
and let it flip through so people could see
Right. Okay, good.
how
Yeah,
it goes from A to B.
I mean, I think that people do, you see an image that's been, clearly genetically modified somehow.
Right, exactly.
And how the heck did she do that? But so
Yeah.
it's kind of neat to just sort of see it in process as it goes.
I think it is too, especially
Yeah.
when you're using tools that many people aren't even familiar with yet. I don't know how long the slide or the projector monitor's been around, but I just discovered it about a year ago. So even somebody who's out there looking for that kind of thing, might not necessarily stumble across all the new technologies that pop up and become available to just anybody. You can, even on a very modest budget, you can go buy a really powerful digital camera.
What kind of camera do you use?
I use a Fuji FinePix, and it's just a modestly priced. I think it was less than $250. It's about a 10.2 megapixel capacity. I know there are much bigger ones available, but when I started out, when I was doing the sunlight stripe images, I was actually using a little point and shoot that was 2.1 megapixel.
Wow.
So even with that's not much more than most people's phones can take
Yeah.
photographs with that kind of resolution. So the power of the camera is not really important. It's really just finding ways to combine what that camera can do with what Photoshop can do and what my imagination can.
Well, that's exactly right. I
Mix them
mean,
up.
you could take just about any image and make something fabulous out of it.
Exactly. And that's part of the reason the photography sessions go on so long, and I have to think about the poor models becoming seriously chilled because we've shot for as long as 8 hours. You do just positioning them differently, flipping through image after image, trying them reversed with different backgrounds.
Yeah.
And you start thinking of new things as you're going along too. So I'm always making notes for the next time.
So let me ask you this. What was the initial thought behind, I think I want to do
That's a good
this?
question. That's a good question. Because it's awful to admit, but the truth of it is, when I first discovered Photoshop, I was working on a photograph of myself, so not a formal portrait, but a picture of me. And I discovered that with Photoshop, with just a little nudge or a little click, I could remove flaws, I could make myself look thinner, I could
Bye-bye
make myself
double
look younger.
chins.
Exactly.
Yeah. Lift and, yeah.
So the whole
Nip and tuck.
exploratory process from an artistic point of view sort of became, how do we start to think about beauty in an era when when literally anyone can be cover of Vogue ready, with
It's true.
It is.
Anybody can be flawless.
Yeah.
Digitally flawless.
Right.
That's true.
So almost everything that I do has really, instead of trying to get away from that, just sort of wallowed in it. And the models tend to be hyper idealized, elongated, smoothed. It's not about a revealing of pure humanity or rough, raw humanity. It's meant to be that sort of glossy, polished, neon. Yeah, because we tend to look for beauty in that way. I think we've moved ourselves that way. So I just think it's an interesting question to think about. But that's exactly the right question to ask, because it all started from, gosh, I could get rid of that little wrinkle just like that. And then now look what I can do.
Well, I kind of get a kick out of people on, photographers talking about, they do beauty shot, glamour shots or whatever, and then, gosh, and she wants me to really make her over. Why didn't she just send her granddaughter into pose? You know what I mean? If she expects me to make her 16, and that's not going to happen. So.
Well, and I think there's some elements of those can be a little uncomfortable where you end up with a result that doesn't really look like the person it's meant to represent. And the fun thing about using cropped images and images that almost never show the model's face is I can get away with that.
Exactly, because you're making art. It's something completely different.
Right, and it's not meant to be a personal image. It's meant
not
to
a
be
portrait.
Right.
Unless you're going to have another go at one of your self-portraits.
Well, no.
I think that's fabulous.
Now that I've discovered my models, some of the very, very early images are of myself, but now that I've discovered these beautiful young ladies who are willing to do this for me, no, it's just too depressing to to think of going back.
Well, I really want to thank you for being here today,
thank you.
because it's been wonderful, and I'll look forward to seeing you on the tour, which is
Lynda.
the first 2 weeks of October.
Yes, it is.
And you're showing in McMinnville with Marilyn Warwicks and with Doug Roy.
516 Northeast 3rd Street. Come see the Tempo Building, and everybody can see the finished ballroom, which is really... Matt Warwick's, my mom's husband, is going to have tango dancers performing in the ballroom.
how
so
fun. What a treat.
we should all look forward to that.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lynda.